Dunchbags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and today I'm going to be filling out my Porter Madness bracket. Now, if you guys have absolutely no clue what's going on, essentially last year a bunch of different YouTubers who are music critics like myself went in and did videos like this for their favorite artists, where a bunch of their more popular songs are put into a March Madness style bracket, and then they kind of pick winners and ultimately declare a number one. Last year I did one for Eden, who, as a lot of you guys know, is my favorite artist, and I thought, hey, you know what, it'd actually be pretty cool if I made this into an annual thing, and I was thinking through what would be the best artist to do this year. Obviously I'm not going to do Eden again, and he doesn't really have all that much new music for me to put into a bracket anyway, so I thought, like, maybe I'd go for Porter Robinson, an artist who I've thoroughly enjoyed and I'd even say loved through every stage of his career so far. If you're a longtime subscriber of mine, you're probably already very aware of how much I love Porter, and fittingly enough, if we're including Virtual Self, he has just about the exact number of songs needed to fit into a 32-player bracket, so I made it into a thing, and we're going to go through it today. But if you guys want to fill out one of these for yourself, I'm going to have a link down in the description where you can check out my post on Reddit where I posted the original image. You guys can go in and do your own little tournament if you want. One quick note before we get into this though is that I'm trying out a new lavalier microphone, so if things sound different, that would be why. I really want to focus on improving quality for you guys this year in order to grow my channel and attract a wider audience. Hopefully having a microphone that isn't my camcorder's internal one will improve that, but if it doesn't, make sure to let me know. But beyond that, I think I'm ready to dig into this. So here in the first round, we've got Vandalism versus Flicker. You know, Vandalism, I think, is probably one of the big three highlights for me on Porter Robinson's Spitfire EP. Always been a song that I've really enjoyed since the very first time I've heard it. But when we're putting it against Flicker, this is going to be extremely difficult. And I do want to note for you guys really quick before we get more into this list is that this was completely randomized when I made it. I totally randomized the seeds and everything, so there are going to be some really tough ones here in the first round, but that's not my fault. I didn't pin these against each other like on purpose in the way that they are. It's just completely random. So Flicker, I've got to say, has got to be the winner here, because it's like when you're thinking about Porter Robinson's long-term career and like the songs that were the most impactful on his sounds, I think Flicker is definitely up there. I mean, so many of the world's live edits and even the stuff on the Shelter tour ended up being kind of based on the Flicker formula, and even just in my personal taste, you know, it's a beautiful song. It's got some great experimental value. That you know, chopped up Japanese vocal is always going to be a highlight. Really a shame to see Vandalism going here in the first round, because I would put it above a lot of the other songs here on this list, and it could have very well progressed into the second or maybe even the third rounds if things happen to stack up right, but gotta give it to Flicker. Over here in the second round, we've got Goodbye to a World versus Years of War. It's interesting because on this list you'll see a bunch of the World's songs got kind of clumped together, and it's very strange because, as I said, I didn't put it this way. It just, the way it was randomized, a bunch of them just happened to be pinned against each other. But really, Years of War, especially in more recent times, definitely isn't one of the highlights on Worlds to me. Goodbye to a World is such like a fitting conclusion to the album. It's such a great wrap up to the story. It's emotional. It's got that like 4/4 over 6/8 kind of thing going on. And Years of War, while I think it is a good, nice little filler track on the album, it just doesn't have that same impact that Goodbye to a World does, so I gotta give it to that one. Here we've got Key versus Eon Break. Once again, one of these really strange things that the randomizer came up with. the fact that there's only 5 songs on that initial Virtual Self EP, and 2 of them happen to get pinned up against each other is very, very weird. But if you guys know me, I'm just going to have to give it to Eon Break. I mean, Key in general, I'd say, is one of the lesser known, lesser popular, I guess, tunes off the Virtual Self EP. But even in the context of its own EP, I think Key is kind of an odd song. Though I don't think it's necessarily a bad cut by any stretch. I do think it probably is the most out of place song on the Virtual Self EP. I think I remember in my review I made some connections to Nanabe. It almost sounded like it could have been off of one of his projects. But Eon Break, and I'll get more into this because I can see Eon Break. I obviously don't know what's going to progress and how things are going to go necessarily with this list, but I can probably talk more about why I love Eon Break, and obviously you can check out my review if you want to get a more in-depth look at that. But I gotta put it above Key at the very least. Here we've got Particle Arts versus Fresh Static Snow, and that one is a kind of tough one as well, but I think it's got to be Fresh Static Snow, and not only because the Fresh Static Snow World's Live edit is so fantastic, because we're obviously that's comparing two things that shouldn't really be compared, because that's not the version that we're talking about here. But Particle Arts, if you remember in my review, I talked about it's got a lot of similarities to Eon Break, and though it's not a carbon copy, it does serve a very similar formula. And that's tough. There are a lot of great original things about the song, but Fresh Static Snow, really one of the more interesting, like distorted and experimental cuts on Worlds, and definitely a favorite. I feel like the impact that song brings in its own context is just so great. And Particle Arts, while I do think it, like, enjoyability wise, if you put them next to each other, I'd probably feel right about the same, just in a completely like subjective point of view. But I think I got to give it to Fresh Static Snow. Okay, here we are in round 5, and a lot of people that are watching this are probably going to be pissed at the one that I end up picking. But we've got the Thrill remix versus Ghost Voices, and I guess I should mention that the Thrill is the only remix I put on this Madness bracket, and strictly because of kind of how I feel about it. I think this remix was not only monumental in Porter's career, and carrying that world sound too was really cool into a form that was beyond just the album, I think was great. And I feel like the song's impact was also absolutely massive. Before this remix came out, you didn't hear a lot of, like, I don't know, bass music songs and things like that with those big arpeggiators being the focus. The Thrill kind of put a lot of that in place, and a ton of people have kind of copied that formula. Even myself, my remix of Paris by the Chainsmokers is very heavily inspired by this remix. Ghost Voices, while it has grown a ton on me throughout this last year and a half, and I really enjoy it now as a track. I don't take back everything that I said about it, but it is better than I probably initially gave it credit for. I can't really put it above the Thrill. Here we've got I'm on Fire versus Language, and this is one of the ones that I kind of feel bad about, because I can't imagine people, like really anyone that goes through this bracket, is going to pick I'm on Fire above Language unless they're super hardcore, like complextro banger kind of in their head, like very old school Porter Robinson. Even, you know, Language is a pretty old track as it is now, but, you know, I'm on Fire is even more old school Porter Robinson, so I can imagine some people who are really into that era picking I'm on Fire. But I mean, I'm even wearing my Language shirt right now. I can't not pick Language. It's got an absolutely iconic melody, an amazing music video. It's just such a nice marriage between, like, Porter Robinson's melodies and his more obviously complex, like, electro music. it's just a fantastic song all around. It bridges the gap so nicely between those two eras of his career, and I just can't not let Language pass into this next round. Here we've got 100% versus Fellow Feeling, and you know, I've got nothing against 100%, although I do think it is a really strange track when you think about Porter's career. Like, I'm assuming most of the people who are newly on the Porter Robinson bandwagon, if they heard that track, they'd probably be extremely confused. But in the context of the Spitfire EP, it's actually quite an enjoyable, like, Moombahton banger, and featuring some of those complextro elements as well. It's super funny too, though. A very, very comedic track. But when we're pinning it up against Fellow Feeling, which is just so fantastic all around, it's got that deeper kind of artistic meaning too. It's like you can't really, I could never put 100% above it, and kind of the same situation as before with Vandalism versus Flicker. While this track could have very easily, for me, beaten a lot of other tracks that are, you know, on this list, it's not going to beat Fellow Feeling. Next up, we've got Divinity versus A Angel, Become God, and you know, I've got nothing against A Angel. I think it's definitely, it's probably one of, I'd say, top 3 cuts from the Virtual Self EP. It might even be second at this point. I do really enjoy that track, and it's got some fantastic trance influences. But Divinity, like, I've just got such great memories with Divinity, and that's definitely part of it. It also had a huge impact as a track. I feel like you just hear that Divinity vocal chop anywhere over like any instrumental in like a DJ set, and people just absolutely freak out because it's such a great vocal chop. And honestly, it's just a great track. The kind of emotion that it evokes is almost like unparalleled in Porter Robinson's music. It's got a great flow, great progression. Yeah, it's just a fantastic track. I can't even, like, just remembering like my first times hearing Worlds, like, and hearing that Divinity vocal chop in the beginning was just like such an amazing experience, and I gotta give it to that track. Here in this next box, we've got Shelter versus Sad Machine, and this is one of those ones that I feel like a lot of people are going to have a really difficult choice with. I'm sure a lot of people actually, if this were organized in a different way, probably would have had Shelter and Sad Machine in their top 2, because those are, I'd say, debatably Porter Robinson's top 2 tracks, and that might actually be like an objective fact there. I think those are actually his 2 most popular tunes. But if you guys have watched my review of Worlds, you might know, and actually, like, maybe you guys wouldn't know what I'm going to pick here. Maybe it's a mystery, but Shelter has actually grown a ton on me throughout the years. In fact, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but when Porter Robinson played Shelter at Paradiso, I think it was 2017, I went a couple years ago. When he played Shelter, I was actually like brought to tears, and it's like part of that's the impact of the music video and everything, but honestly, like, the song has just grown on me so much and has definitely become one of my favorite tunes from Porter. Even though I didn't really initially love it all that much, I think it's a fantastic track. And Sad Machine, on the other hand, while I initially really loved the song, going to Porter's shows and whatnot, just like the references to Sad Machine, like what feels like every 5 minutes, like whether it's the melody or the vocal being referenced or something, I feel like it's just too much, and I've really gotten tired of the track. So I'm actually going to give it to Shelter. Like I said, if you've seen my review of that track, you may have not expected that, but yeah, I'm going to let that one progress. Next up here, we've got Sea of Voices versus Say My Name, and this, I don't know, I guess I don't want to say that if it was the World's Live edit of Say My Name that it would necessarily beat Sea of Voices, because, like, honestly, if I'm being completely straight with you guys, Sea of Voices is one of my all-time favorite songs, and even though a lot of people don't necessarily like it, and it definitely got mixed reception when it was initially reviewed, I couldn't really put Say My Name above it, even though I do prefer, I will say now, the World's Live edit of Say My Name over the original mix, but the original mix is great in its own right too. Great melodies, great kind of complextro thing going on, but gotta give it to Sia Voices. Next up here we've got the Seconds versus Wildcat, and I wouldn't say either of these are necessarily my favorite Porter Robinson tunes. In fact, I had not even like listened to Wildcat before I decided to make this list. It's one of Porter's like very old tunes, came in between Say My Name and the Spitfire EP, so it's one of those ones that I wouldn't really have a reason to check out because like I just don't often dig that far back into Porter Robinson's discography. I'm very into Spitfire, very into Worlds. That's kind of my main thing with him. My peak interest in Porter Robinson were definitely those eras of his career. But Wildcat is actually a pretty enjoyable tune. The Seconds, however, when I was recently listening through the Spitfire EP, actually stuck out to me a bit more than like it usually did. It's just a great electro track. I feel like one of the more underrated, underappreciated tunes on that EP. And though like this track would have easily lost to a lot of other things on this list, probably in the first round, considering it's against Wildcat, which is just a tune that, while not bad, I don't necessarily really care about. So I'm actually going to give it to the Seconds. Here up next we've got Polygon Dust versus Lionhearted, and yeah, this one's not going to be too tough. Very similarly with Years of War, I think Polygon Dust is more of a filler track on Worlds than it is like a true highlight. It definitely wasn't defining in Porter's sound, and I'm not even entirely sure he plays the song anymore. So it's obvious that he kind of feels the same way. And though it was a track that introduced me to Les Metres, who is a band that I just adore nowadays, and you know, I really enjoyed their new EP. In fact, I probably should review it because of how much I liked it. But when we're pinning it against Lionhearted, I feel like that track is just really, really superior. I remember when Fantano compared that track to like an MGMT track, and definitely those old indie influences are very present on this tune, but like, you know, it's Lionhearted, and it's just got that crazy, like, awesome distorted lead in the drop, and it's just such a fun, enjoyable track with a great melody too, I should probably add. So gonna give it to Lionhearted. Here we've got Angel Voices versus Spitfire, and this one I'd say is a little bit of a tough one. Angel Voices is probably, I'd say, my second favorite tune from the Virtual Self moniker. Just a fantastic work, really captures the essence of, you know, the Virtual Self live experience in really a lot of ways, like sampling different elements from the different tracks in that. It's just such a cool tune, and a tune that I prefer greatly over Ghost Voices, though I mentioned that song has grown on me a lot. But when we're pinning it, once again, it's one of these hard decisions. When we're pinning it against Spitfire, which I feel like is one of the true like classics of all dubstep, there's like you know, Skrillex, Scary Monsters, and Nice Sprites, and like Flux Pavilion, I Can't Stop, and like Dr. P's Bulletproof, and things like that from that era. But Spitfire is one of those songs to me. Like, Spitfire is one of those true like classic bro step songs, and it just builds such a crazy atmosphere that not a lot of dubstep tunes from this era did. Just got a fantastic melody, like crazy sound design, at least at the time. And though this song hasn't necessarily aged as well as a lot of these songs, and maybe it won't even age as well as Angel Voices, because, you know, that song's got a lot of throwback elements that may make it kind of outlast that, and people might look at Spitfire in a few years and be like, wow, that really does not go off as well as it did back then. But I feel like its impact is just so huge. You know, in terms of like Porter dubstep, there's this and there's The State, and this is like the clear standout. It's just such an amazing track. I can't not let it progress here. Up here we've got Natural Light versus Hear the Bells, and sorry I'm playing with my hair right now. It's really kind of annoying me. This is definitely an interesting matchup here. Hear the Bells, if you guys didn't know, is a remix of the Imaginary Cities song Bells of Cologne. I hope I said that all completely right. But you know, the song it's got some original elements. It definitely feels like it fits on the Worlds album, but Natural Light, really, when I look back at Worlds as an album, it's like that was definitely one of the true highlights. It's got some, you know, like interesting future bass elements almost, and like it's such an interesting little interlude on Worlds, and it's got such a dark sound, some amazing samples. Definitely, I feel like one of the more underrated, underappreciated cuts from that album. Not to say that Hear the Bells isn't like underappreciated, because I feel like that song almost deserves the spotlight as much as some of the other ones that have been more popular, but Natural Light, I feel like, is the more underappreciated of the two, and the one that I've enjoyed just coming back to myself. Here we've got Hello versus Easy, and this isn't going to be too tough of a one, but I do want to shout out Hello, because a lot of people I don't think really talk about this one all that much. It's one of only a couple collaborations, like producer collaborations, that Porter Robinson has ever done in collaboration with Lazy Rich, and it's a really solid electro tune. But when we're putting it up against another one of Porter Robinson's collaborations, and one of the most famous ones, of course, Easy with Matt Zoe, though a bit less experimental than a lot of Matt Zoe's other stuff, this song is just absolutely phenomenal. Though when we're talking about like this particular era in Porter's career that happened in between Spitfire and Worlds, I don't prefer this song to Language. I'm going to put that out there right now. Whenever I've seen a lot of people debate this in the past, like Easy or Language, which is the better tune, and it's always like I have never not picked Language. But Easy, regardless, is a really fantastic track with a great melody, great hook, great sampling. Yeah, that's really all I have to say about it, so I gotta give it to Easy. I just realized I completely skipped over the State versus Unison, and that one's actually a pretty important one, so I'm kind of embarrassed right now. But for the one that's going to be pinned against Easy, I've got to give it to Unison. I tweeted out maybe 6 months ago or so something in regard to the track and how like absolutely phenomenal it is. Unison, I feel like, is one of the most underappreciated tunes of Porter Robinson. It's my favorite of the electro songs that he's done. Yeah, it's just it's so phenomenal in every way. It's got a great melody. A lot of you might know that the first I ever heard of Porter Robinson was through Knife Party's remix of this track, and of course, like, I was very into Knife Party at the time, so that makes sense. But the original mix of this song is even more fantastic, and it's grown on me so much throughout the years. I actually listen to this one, like, even in recent months, very, very regularly, and in my opinion, it just keeps living on. Like, the song's ability to keep working in, like, I feel like if any DJ played this in a set nowadays, though people might not recognize the melody as a classic as much as something, you know, like Sad Machine or Easy or Shelter or Divinity or Language or a number of different Porter Robinson tracks, for me, if this track was played, it would just bring back, for one, so much nostalgia, and for two, it just carries so much power. And not to say that the State is a bad track, but in terms of the originals on Spitfire, I would say it's probably my least favorite. So here we've got literally my favorite song on Spitfire versus my least favorite song. That is, if we're not including remixes, of course. But gotta give it to Unison. All right, so we are now going into the second round. Things are going to begin getting more intense because obviously most of the tracks that I don't care all that much for from Porter's discography have been completely eliminated. So yeah, we're going to start getting into the more intense stuff. Here we've got Flicker versus Goodbye to a World, and man, this one's actually a tough one. It would probably actually depend on my mood which song this picked, which is probably the case for a lot of these, and I'm not actually sure what is going to come out on top based on, you know, it all depends on what's being matched together and the mood of the day. I guess very similarly to real March Madness, like, just because something is, a team might be the better seed, they're not necessarily going to progress. But Flicker versus Goodbye to a World, that one is actually so tough. Both, I think, are so great, such standout highlights from the World's album. I wasn't thinking this matchup was actually going to be this tough, but they really, to me, they're so great in two different ways. Like, when we're factoring in experimentation and everything like that, I feel like the tracks are on a pretty equal level when we're talking about the impact on Porter Robinson's entire career. Obviously, Flicker is the better of the two, but when we're talking about like playing so well into the story arc of Worlds, Goodbye to a World is going to come out on the top. So it's just like, and both are just so melodically great as well. You know, I'm gonna have to give it to Flicker, because it's like, it's just such an iconic masterpiece from Porter Robinson. And when, even though like as of right now I might like listen to Worlds and enjoy the tracks about equally, when I'm thinking back in like 50 years probably about which track had the most impact, obviously, and like which one I'm going to remember more for its melodic elements, I think Flicker is going to be the winner here. Here we've got Eon Break versus Fresh Static Snow, and as much as I do like Fresh Static Snow, Eon Break is just such a staple in that virtual self thing. It just, even though I originally, I'd say, was a bit confused about the track, it's just such a masterpiece like Eon Break is. And I know a lot of people prefer like Ghost voices on that EP, but I feel like in terms of just like setting the bar for that project, kind of setting the standard, introducing virtual self, that track was just so unbelievable. And though Fresh Static Snow is a great highlight from Worlds, I feel like if I'm going to progress one track from Virtual Self, and Virtual Self is deserving of having a chunk of this because I feel like it is a great project, Eon Break has really got to be that song. Okay, here we've got the Thrill remix versus Language, and like, kind of similarly as before, when we're talking completely subjectively, I enjoy these two songs about the same, but I'm probably gonna give it to Language, and that's a tough thing for me to say considering how much I love that remix of the Thrill. It's one of my favorite remixes of all time, but as I mentioned before with Language, got an absolutely fantastic, unforgettable melody. One of, I feel like, the most iconic electro house songs of all time. Just brings so much emotion to the table, especially when you're tying in the music video, even though obviously this isn't about that. But when I think about this song, when I hear it, I think about the videos, kind of similarly to Shelter, so obviously it's going to ring back even more emotion, and that is a fantastic music video. So yeah, I'm gonna give this to Language. Fellow Feeling versus Divinity. Now that's a tough one as well, but I'm probably gonna give this to Fellow Feeling, because very similarly to Sea of Voices, Fellow Feeling is one of the big two standouts from Worlds, one of the tracks that I feel like really defined the message of the album, and it's just so fantastic. Divinity, while it does have a lot of great things about it, I do have bones to pick about the song. There isn't much negative that I could say about Fellow Feeling. In fact, it's basically like a 10 out of 10 track. There's nothing that I don't like about Fellow Feeling. Whereas Divinity, it does kind of drag a little bit. It has the, that same vocal just refraining throughout the entire thing. And while it does have a cool progression in terms of like how the drops build and how they shape and meld together, it's just not perfect to me. And it's like, even though it is iconic, I gotta give it to Fellow Feeling. Now, Shelter versus Sea of Voices, funny enough, I was just mentioning that track. That is such a tough one, and it's like, I don't completely take back everything I said in my Shelter review. There are some very valid points. I feel like even though I do get that Maddie Porter Robinson balance better in that song than I did originally, it just doesn't hold up for me when it's pinned against Sea of Voices. That's just so tough, because I just have such a history of that song. When it came out as a single, it completely subverted the expectations of everyone. It's such an amazing, unexpected tune, a huge standout from the Worlds album, obviously. Its impact is actually less big than I kind of originally anticipated, but I feel like this song kind of set an interesting precedent for artists putting out songs initially for like albums and projects like this, which might make people think like, wow, this is just such a huge change in pace. And honestly, the song just packs so much emotion as well. So, you know, while I do love Shelter a lot, and I enjoy it a lot more now than I previously did, in terms of even like a dance tune, I feel like this is a more fun tune than Sea of Voices. But with something that I'm just going to sit down and listen to and enjoy and reflect on, Sea of Voices is going to be the bigger one for me. Here we've got the Seconds versus Lionhearted, and like I said, the Seconds, if pinned against a lot of tracks, probably wouldn't progress, and I'm not going to have it progress here, even though I do feel like it is one of the more underrated, underappreciated tunes from Spitfire. Lionhearted is just too great to pass up, and even though I would even say I didn't enjoy Lionhearted as much as I probably should have when it initially released, just looking back on it, it's just got so many great elements that make it memorable. Great lead melody and everything. The Seconds has some really solid elements in it as well, but I feel like Lionhearted just lands a bit above it. Spitfire here versus Natural Light. As I said, Natural Light I feel is one of the more underappreciated tunes on the Worlds album, and my hair's being a bum again. It looks so dumb right now. But yeah, as I was saying, Spitfire Spitfire is just such an iconic song, and you can't put Natural Light above that, no matter how good of an interlude it is, no matter how like dark it is and the kind of like sampling it does. Spitfire is just such a classic dubstep anthem, like great crazy sound design, builds just an atmosphere unlike really any other dubstep song I've heard before. Gotta give it to that. And here we've got Unison versus Easy, and you know, many years ago I may have not thought that I would put Unison above Easy, which by the way I'm going to do, and I'm going to fix that right now here on the screen to put into the next round. Unison versus Easy. As I said, Easy was never my favorite of Porter Robinson's melodic tunes, and Unison, you know, as I said before, it just packs so much power. It's just such a fantastic complexure song, one of my favorite that the genre has ever put out. It's got to go to it. Like there's no way here, and that'll be interesting pinning up my two favorite tunes from the Spitfire EP here up. But yeah, Unison is just so fantastic. If you haven't listened to it for whatever reason, like, I strongly suggest that you do. And even though Easy does have a great melody and there are a lot of memorable things about the song, Unison is just one of my favorite Porter Robinson tunes, and I can't see it not progressing here. Going into round 3 here, things are going to, of course, get even more intense than the last round. Here we've got Flicker versus Eon Break, and you know, I'm actually, you know how I had such a hard time picking between Flicker and Goodbye to a World? I'm actually going to put Eon Break above this, and yeah, allow it to progress here to the semifinals. Flicker, it is a fantastic track in so many regards, and it is absolutely iconic. But Eon Break, it's kind of the staple of Porter Robinson's, you know, third leg of his career. Obviously, he had his Complextro phase, he had his Worlds phase, and now he's kind of doing the Virtual Self stuff, which has more throwback elements. But Eon Break takes those elements and just flips it in a new, interesting, experimental way that I just feel like is even maybe almost unprecedented in his career. While I do think Sea of Voices set an interesting precedent for Worlds, Eon Break is also super fantastic as well. Language versus Fellow Feeling. Now this is a tough one because it's kind of obvious when you're listening through Worlds that Fellow Feeling is kind of referencing that melodic Complextro stuff like Language and Easy. It's going back to that sound when it kind of pins these two sounds up against each other, obviously, with the first drop just being this crazy, glitchy, Complextro sounds, and then the second drop goes into the more melodic vein. But when I'm thinking back on it, it's like, geez, like Language, it has such a fantastic melody, it's such a memorable song, but when you're pinning it up against Fellow Feeling, which is a song that while references that same style, it's a song that has a deeper artistic meaning, it has lore behind it that makes it so much more powerful, and it's just, at this point, it's just such a staple in Porter Robinson's career. While you can't really say Language isn't, but I feel like Fellow Feeling, at least for me, is the more powerful song. It's got, in my book, even a better melody, and it's got, obviously it has more differentiation between those two elements. While Language does an excellent job weaving those two things together, Fellow Feeling does a good job differentiating them and giving a more powerful meaning behind the track. So gotta give it to Fellow Feeling here. Here, also progressing into the finals, obviously we've got Sea of Voices versus Lionhearted, and while I do like Lionhearted a lot, it's like Sea of Voices for me. Even though I did enjoy Porter Robinson a lot prior to the release of Worlds, I caught onto the train earlier than some people, though I know a lot of people were much more hardcore about Porter Robinson before this. But Sea of Voices was really the track that turned me on to him. It was like I had heard songs like Language and Easy, Unison, and Spitfire prior to the song's release, but it just caught me so off guard, and it was just such a beautiful kind of interlude type track, and just something that I never in a million years would have expected to hear from this same guy. And though a lot of people might not like it, it's like, oh, Sea of Voices is 4-chord basic, you know, whatever. It's just such an artistic change in direction. I guess similarly to Eon Break, just set a certain precedent for this era in Porter Robinson's career that I absolutely love. And yeah, I gotta give it to Sea of Voices. And here we've got Spitfire versus Unison. Obviously, as I already mentioned, my two favorite tracks from Porter's Spitfire EP. Honestly, a tough one. As I've mentioned before, Spitfire is just an iconic bro step tune. But you know, as I mentioned previously, when you're thinking of like longevity, Spitfire, while it is very good for its era and it is an absolute classic, I don't really feel like it quite could have matched up to Unison. Like, maybe I'm completely wrong about this, but I feel like if I heard the two in a DJ set now, Unison would still just pack just as much power as it did when it released. It just is absolutely energetic, and there are so many great things about the track that are on par with it, but it still manages to live up as good as it did even today. So I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna put Unison here in the semifinals. So here, God, we've got 4 tunes left, and these are. We've got all 3 of Porter Robinson's phases represented here. Interestingly enough, Sea of Voices and Fellow Feeling both ended up in the top 4 here, and they're 2 tracks that come right next to each other on Worlds. I think this is important, though, that every stage of Porter Robinson's career is represented. It kind of makes you realize that really in every phase of his career, he's done something really extraordinary. And these tracks that are listed here are among the ones that I feel like really set the stone in those careers. While they might not be the most appreciated songs, in fact, I don't think any of these songs are among like his most popular. Probably in terms of fan favorites, these are definitely more up there, especially Fellow Feeling. But yeah, that's tough. It's definitely going to be tough eliminating really here any phase of Porter Robinson's career, because I really love every aspect of him so much, whether it be Complextra, Worlds, or Virtual Self. I've thoroughly enjoyed every phase. So I just want to set that before we get into the semifinals round. Eon Break versus Fellow Feeling. It's just such an unbelievable mashup. I think Eon Break is the, like, I guess, pinnacle Virtual Self tune, but Fellow Feeling is just still so unbelievable. Like the artistic nature of the song, the way that Porter Robinson kind of, I guess, explained the entire purpose of Worlds when we're looking at that album versus the previous stage of it, obviously the Spitfire stage of his career. Fellow Feeling is just so powerful, so memorable, insane melody, and while Eon Break does have that, Fellow Feeling is just so crazy, so inspired, and like I said, it really is kind of the pinnacle of Porter Robinson in terms of like the World's mission, the kind of, I guess, artsy nature of that album. It's kind of the top when it comes to that. And Sea of Voices is very excellent in that regard as well. But Fellow Feeling is not being pinned up against Sea of Voices right now. So yeah, it's while I think they are two of Porter Robinson's best tunes, and I'm going to stand by that. I'm gonna give it to Fellow Feeling to go into the finals here. And this one is also very tough. Sea of Voices versus Unison. As I've sung the praises of Unison quite a bit in this video already, it's like I can't see myself not putting Sea of Voices into the finals, because I have on numerous occasions identified it as one of my favorite songs of all time. It really changed my outlook of who Porter Robinson is, what kind of producer and musician he is. And though it is, you know, your basic 4-chord whatever, the power of the song and the way it builds and the way it catches you off guard with that big break toward the end of the track, just everything about it is so fantastic. And while I think Unison is pretty much a 10 out of 10 tune as well in my book, I just can't see myself not putting Sea of Voices into here. Like, it's just, I can't not do it. And here in the finals, this obviously outlines how much I love Worlds as an album. But here we have, and that part of the reason that I think the randomizer did a poor job is by putting these in such a way that these songs could be matched up against each other, because if you know me, these are my two favorite Porter Robinson songs, Fellow Feeling and Sea of Voices. And this is actually a really tough one, because they're just two fantastic songs. I think they're pretty much perfect in every regard. There's really nothing that could make me love these tracks any less than I do. The only thing I can think of is what other people are going to like, and what's probably going to ultimately be the more impactful tune long term. Like I said, I don't think Sea of Voices was, I guess, in its sonic design, as impactful as I kind of would have anticipated. I would have expected to see much more songs, and I guess Dabin's new album, I feel like, does take a little bit of influence from this style even, and there were other songs as well. You know, Juventa's Superhuman alternative mix, I feel like, was definitely pulling from this. Paris Blom had a tune called In Your Eyes. He had like an experimental rework that was definitely influenced by this song. But Fellow Feeling has been hugely influential as well. And though I can't think of too many songs that feel like they're trying to directly pull from that inspiration, obviously there's Truth and Malice by Intercom. That tune was clearly trying to go for the Fellow Feeling sound, and I will always say that. But especially with the kind of noisy, crazy nature, making kind of noise and dance music collide as an art form, I feel like Fellow Feeling is always going to be the more influential track. And you know, when we're talking about the Porter Robinson Worlds live show, I guess that could be the tiebreaker too, is that even though I love Sea of Voices, I would take Fellow Feelings live version over Sea of Voices any day, because Sea of Voices is an extremely awkward song to watch Porter Robinson perform. In fact, one of the more underwhelming moments, I feel like, from his Worlds live show. So yeah, I am going to give it to Fellow Feeling here, and like I said, that's a tough one, because just talking about the studio versions of this song, these two songs, I should say, when I'm listening through Worlds, it's like the section that's these two songs is the big highlight on the album, and it's one of my all-time favorite albums. Really hard choice here. Yeah, Fellow Feeling's gonna take the cake. The current wave of like noise bass and whatnot is very clearly drawing inspiration from this track, and it's just like it just set such an amazing precedent. And I feel like a lot of people, or had this track not existed, I'm sure people still would have very much enjoyed Worlds as an album, but I feel like a lot of the artists, a lot of the producers that listened to the album and kind of took it away from more than it was on the surface for the deeper meaning and what Porter was trying to really ultimately say and evoke with the album, is wrapped up so well in the song. And yeah, there's as I've said before in this video, there's really nothing that I would change at all about the song. It's like a perfect 10 out of 10 song. Sea of Voices, I could even like maybe take away a fraction of a point for the fact that it is just like, you know, 4 chords over and over and over again. That's never really bothered me, but when I'm just looking at an objective standpoint, I feel like that kind of reduces the song as well, even though I do like them equally in just terms of like absolutely subjective listening. But yeah, Fellow Feelings got to be the king here. Pinnacle, Porter Robinson, that was kind of a little bit of alliteration here. But so yeah, I don't anticipate you guys to have the same kind of results as me at all. In fact, it's really wonderful to me that Porter Robinson has such a diverse fan base that's able to relate to his different phases and have different songs that end up coming out as #1. I think in general, most of the people that do this are probably going to end up with something from Worlds as their #1 track. I've seen just in the Reddit post, I know Divinity ended up winning somebody's thing. I think Sea of Voices ended up at #1 for another person's one. So it's like, I can imagine that a lot of people are going to put something from Worlds, and considering it's his only album, that's kind of expected. It's got a ton of fantastic tracks, and I feel like that even better outlines just how great of an album that was. But yeah, if you guys, like I said before, if you guys want to check out the bracket for yourselves, I'm going to have the link to the Reddit post down in the description. And if you guys want to, you can come back here in the comment section and let me know what your winner ended up being. Because, you know, while I think Fellow Feeling was kind of destined to be the winner of my list anyway, because I couldn't see anything else beating it, unless it was a really weird, like, mood change kind of thing where, you know, Sea of Voices and Fellow Feeling ended up in the first bracket. That could have maybe ended up with Sea of Voices at the top, or maybe even Unison. One of those ones from one of those 3 probably would have, maybe even Language too, depending on my mood and whatnot. But I hope you guys enjoy the bracket though. I hope you have fun with it, and make sure to let me know if you guys are enjoying content like this. I'm trying to branch out and do more non-album review stuff, as you guys know from that Riot video I did, which ended up being a little bit more poorly received than I kind of anticipated. I still really like doing videos that are a little bit more out there, and I think videos like this are really fun too. I definitely want to do more artist top 10s and things like that, because it's nice to break out of that very strict album review mold that I've been so stuck in. But you guys can anticipate some album reviews coming soon. I've got a lot of stuff that I want to cover, and there's going to be a huge rapid fire reviews video that I've been meaning to record for a little while. Things just keep piling up, and you know, as I mentioned before, I'm in my last semester of school, so it's tough trying to make everything work together. But I've got content coming for you guys. Make sure to look forward to it. Yeah, once again, let me know if you guys are liking the lavalier microphone. It's clipped down here on my leg, which is why you're probably not seeing it. But if this comes out really bad somehow, I might just end up re-recording the video, but I'm hoping I don't have to. Anyway, I'm Landon Remixes, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.